Why, Gus? How come this isn't up there?
It will be.
Oh, okay.
Our journey continues.
Do you do that? Thank you.
Streets of Los Angeles, Argentina. Back to the rural countryside of the U.S. Now down to the San Diego area and different time period and different topic. Lorenzen is going to speak to us about segregation.
Hi everybody, thank you all very much for being here and being so attentive. My topic today is segregation in the school system and how it affects the Chicano community and how it isolates them from outside opportunities. My thesis statement today is it is extremely difficult to separate the socioeconomic aspects of the Chicano family from the cultural aspects because both the socioeconomic and cultural traditions rely heavily on each other. What is segregation? Segregation is the isolation of students in race or in school by race so that schools can be racially identified. Generally, it refers to schools that serve one minority race or schools that serve predominantly minority students. There are two main types of segregation, de facto and de jure, and you'll see why later de jure is so important. De jure versus de facto segregation. De jure segregation is basically racial segregation that has been implemented by governmental actions or law. It was first officially introduced in the 1896 court case of Plessy versus Ferguson. The court case ruled that de jure segregation was permissible as long as the facilities were separate but equal. De facto segregation is basically racial segregation that results from the actions of private individuals or unknown forces, not from governmental law. De facto segregation is usually the result of housing patterns, demographic movements, and economic conditions. What does segregation do to children? Segregation has negative psychological and social effects on the child's mind. Segregation teaches children that he or she is not good enough, and this concept is something that the child carries with them for the rest of their life. Segregation weakens a child's self-esteem. It separates children from each other, which removes them from the social environment needed in order to have a good educational experience, and it also separates them from learning how to relate to one another through different races and different cultures. Segregation creates distance between cultures and people, as I just said. It lessens educational opportunities by placing children in separate facilities. It reinforces the differences between class, race, culture, and geographic area. It also decreases their future job opportunities. Where does segregation begin? Segregation begins in school, but is further carried into the home of the child and thus affects the family's dynamic. For many children, entrance into the public school system brings the first confrontation with the English language. And this was an article, this was a comic strip put in the New York Times in 2000 regarding segregation, and it actually dealt with separate but equal, and it was an example of how they actually aren't equal. All they have to do is have similar facilities. And welcome to Lemon Grove, California. This is the focal point, this specific case, because it deals with the Chicano community. And the historical significance of it is segregation plays into the socioeconomic and cultural role of the child through school, and that's what this is focusing on. An example of the segregation is seen in the 1931 Lemon Grove, California elementary school. De facto segregation, and this is why it's important, de facto segregation was implemented on the 75 Mexican-American students that were removed from their classrooms and forced to attend another school, the Olive Street School. The parents of the Mexican-American students were uninformed of the school's decision to separate the children, and they fought to have this decision revoked. And they formed the neighborhood association of Lemon Grove. After that, with the help of the Mexican consulate, the Mexican-American children and their parents won the court case and were allowed readmittance to the Lemon Grove school. The importance of this specific case is that it was the first segregation case that was won by a minority. And this is Lemon Grove School in 1931. Roberto Alvarez is the young man right here. He's the main defendant of the case. The rest of the students were also part of the case underneath his name. The facts of this case: the official name of the case is Roberto Alvarez versus the Board of Trustees of the Lemon Grove School District. It was filed on January 5th, 1931. It began when the school board and members of the PTA gathered to discuss the interracial classrooms at Lemon Grove Elementary School. 75 of the children attending Lemon Grove Elementary were first-generation Mexican Americans that were being educated in California. The school's attendance was a total of 169 students, which means almost half of those students were Mexican American children. On July 23rd, 1930, 6 months prior to the case, the school board met and actually decided unanimously to segregate the children from other children. And that's when de facto segregation it resulted from the actions of the private individuals and to segregate the classroom. In Brown versus the Board of Education, this is the map that they used to diagram where segregation is predominant in the United States. Public school segregation in the U.S. in 1954. During Brown versus the Board of Education, the Supreme Court under Chief Justice Earl Warren ruled race-based segregation in public schools to be illegal. The decision became the cornerstone of the civil rights movement in the South for African Americans. And as you will see as I continue through my slides, I was looking for pictures of Chicano protests dealing with segregation. However, I was unable to find these pictures, and I'll talk about that in a little while. But the expressions of inequality. For years, the Chicano culture has been expressing its dissatisfaction with stereotypes and cultural stigmas through different forms of media. For example, television, radio, literature, music, and poetry. Author and mother Isabel Allende said it best: "How can we not speak about war, poverty, and inequality when people who suffer from these afflictions do not have a voice to speak?" And here's an example. Norman Rockwell painted this picture of Ruby Bridges when she was being escorted by the police to her new school in New Orleans. On November 14th, 1960, 6-year-old Ruby Bridges Hall became the first African-American child to desegregate an elementary school, and she went down in history for this. And this poem is entitled "Stupid America." It was written by Abelardo Delgado in 1969, and this is how it goes. "Stupid America. See that Chicano with a knife in his steady hand? He doesn't want to knife you. He wants to sit on a bench and carve Christ figures, but you won't let him. Stupid America. Hear that Chicano shouting curses on the street? He is a poet without pencil and pen. And since he cannot write, he will explode. Stupid America. Remember that Chicano flunking math and English? He is the Picasso of your Western states, but he will die with 1,000 masterpieces hanging only in his mind." The significance of this poem is when Abelardo wrote this in 1969, he was attending a conference for counselors on the East Coast. And after being at this conference, he was so frustrated with what he heard at the conference, with all the complaints from the counselors, talking about how the schools weren't being directed correctly, how the children were not performing. He was so frustrated hearing all this that this poem came out of it, and I found it to be significant because it expresses what these children are not being given. They're not being given the opportunities to be the artists that they want to be. They're not being given the school materials to accomplish their tasks and their goals, and they're not passing their classes because of a lot of this, and it's represented here through poetry. This is a picture of a protest during the 1950s of African Americans protesting school segregation. And the reason that I have so many pictures of African Americans instead of Chicanos is because there is not a lot of information on Chicano segregation and how people have dealt with it. And I believe that's because a lot of the time it is pushed under the door. Nobody wants to hear about it. They have a lack of representation, there's a lack of political advice, there's a lack of care about what's going on with them. So a lot of during, in the history of the country, a lot of these things weren't looked at and they were neglected. So I was unable to come up with significant pictures. But it isn't important what the color of these people are. And that's the bottom line. It's that it happened to every child and people are still dealing with it. And here's another example of a poem that talks about the suffering of children through education. Pride and love are lost within the yellow cumulative folder. The one that limits and relegates my boys to hoods and slaves and my girls to early ugliness and pain. Pride is gone forever from a well-equipped science lab when the young scientists cannot read from a geography shelf, from a globe, a map, a bowl of flowers. When their only purpose is destruction and the consequence, a silent, unexplained punishment. Pride runs cold when Andres scribbles their names upon a wall with a broken window. They broke it. Once in, they wrote the cry, "Know me, I am someone." Pride runs cold when each verdict given by them, each judgment solicited by them, each idea of justice and love and affection to them is a swat, a slap, a denial of love. And horror takes its place when a teacher knows that it's really all they know. Pride is denied when love is lost as children stumble through the maze of English to hate and deny it. The lack of knowing English in schools is very detrimental to the success of a student. And I think this is shown here very well through the poem, the example of it. This is the Milwaukee Public Schools. In 1964, during the modern era of civil rights, a law began during 1963 when Lloyd Barbie, a Milwaukee lawyer, became the head of the Milwaukee NAACP. The Milwaukee Public Schools had operated a neighborhood school system. As the Inner Core grew, the effect of this policy was to create a sharply segregated system. Barbie and the NAACP demanded that changes be made, particularly to the use of busing to achieve integration. Milwaukee Public Schools refused to modify the neighborhood school policy, and the NAACP then organized a boycott of the Inner Core schools and opened freedom schools in their place. The public schools responded by creating an open transfer policy, which made it easier for students to transfer to schools outside their own neighborhoods. Unfortunately, the open transfer policy proved to be an open invitation for white students to flee from black schools, and the segregation grew worse. The fleeing of white students from schools is also known as white flight, and that's important because a lot of the areas that were defined by the school lines, by school systems, and by the city physically segregated these children, and people left. The future begins now. And what can we do? If it is necessary to segregate a child because of a difference in learning, we should do it at an early age so that it isn't something that they're ashamed of. We should encourage interaction between different races with academic and extracurricular activities. We should eliminate academic forms of competition like tracking and grouping. We should decrease the number of students to teacher ratios to increase the educational experiences. We can create clearly defined rules and implement them equally on everyone. Maintain an active and informed student body. Involve the parents in their child's educational experience, and inform the community and parents of the benefits of being a positive mentor to their children. The resources for a better future are out there, so take advantage of them. Here are a few links that lead us to some excellent sources for after-school programs, governmental programs, and I'll show you a couple of them.
Shall I? Back down to me.
Back down to you? Okay. Thank you. It's all right. I don't mind. Thank you very much. But these programs are extremely important because they can help the child to get the experiences that they need to to accomplish their goals. It's outside influence, it's community involvement that makes the educational experience positive and successful. Murphy's Law, right?
Which one? After?
Yeah.
You only do it after school.
All right. Anyway, excellent source of information for parents looking to assist their children through school. Yeah, another one. Any one you want, doesn't matter. Okay. This site is a great source of information. It actually helps guide students through the appropriate steps to accomplish their goals in school. It hooks them up with financial aid information, college information on different universities, different programs that will help them for minority students, all sorts of different things. And this site is more for teachers and I think I'd say parents. It actually gives them lists of anything you could think of that would relate to NAACP, the LULAC, anything like that. It's all on here. Okay. That's good. Thank you, Gus. So there's 3 of some sites that I really liked. And to bring this all together to a nice little conclusion, I took a quote from Ruth Simmons, who was given the 1998 award for Teacher of the Year. She's from the East Coast and she came from a very poor family, underwent a lot of adversity getting her education, and she now has 2 masters. She's Teacher of the Year, she has a couple of books out, and she's just a very predominant person in society. So, and her quote is, "We live in a complex environment in which we are forced to care about people who do not look like us, who do not understand us, and who do not eat the same things we eat, who do not believe in the same God. We can learn to cross boundaries imposed by cultural, ethnic, and religious, or can we learn to cross boundaries by, Can we learn to cross boundaries imposed by cultural, ethnic, and religious differences? We owe it to our children and our children's children to try." Thank you.
Felicidades.
Yay! You're so cute, man.
Sí, pues pueden ver la diversidad de lo que están haciendo nuestros estudiantes, ¿no?
Don't worry about it, dude. Honestly, I don't care.
Thought it was connected.
I think for my part, as the facilitator, the chapter facilitator, that was a big challenge. We, as an Institute for World Languages and Cultures, quite frequently, we have such diverse curriculum within our department. We're very different from most university language departments in that we go beyond language, we go beyond literature. We have many of the curriculum of the courses that we offer deal with issues that have been presented today. And one of the things that as we have been directing our students, one of the things that we've told them and we've tried to instill is that the Capstone project is yours. El proyecto es suyo. Como estudiante, usted tiene que decidir lo que usted quiere hacer. Nosotros les vamos a guiar. Y si deciden hacer algún proyecto que tenga que ver con asuntos más allá de las culturas. Entonces es obligatorio que los vincules de una forma con la cultura. Como han visto ustedes esta mañana, tenemos ya 4 de las presentaciones nos han llevado a asuntos muy sociales, políticos a veces, pero los estudiantes los han vinculado bastante bien con lo que es nuestra meta en este instituto. Somos el Instituto de Lenguas y Culturas Mundiales, y nuestros estudiantes nos han llevado a través del mundo y siguen llevándonos a diferentes partes de Estados Unidos, ¿no? donde hay población hispana, latina, y en otra ocasión vamos a ver una presentación que tiene que ver con el mundo japonés, porque es el otro major. Mientras tanto, mientras esperamos unos minutos, si gustan más café o si gustan algo de comer. La próxima presentación empieza a las 11:30.
¿Desde la mañana? ¿Cómo se dice the word for chimney? Chimenea.
¿Quién es tu mamá? Dile quién es tu mamá.
Mi nombre es Eliseo, papá de Marisa, de él,
Y ya viste, anduvimos perdidos.
Ah, sí.
Sí, pero veníamos Sí, pobrecita, es que estaba con pendiente. Y no teníamos a